Oh my God, Ava, stop begging. It's embarrassing. My mom snapped across the Easter table, loud enough for everyone to hear. My cousin's fork froze midway to her mouth. My aunt looked down at her plate. The whole room went quiet, but not quiet enough to miss my brother's laugh. You're 35. Maybe try saving instead of asking for handouts, he said, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin he's perfected since we were kids. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking why my college fund disappeared. Then Mom raised her glass and said, maybe if you weren't so irresponsible, you wouldn't need to bring this up at dinner. That's when Mr. Harlan, our bank manager, who was sitting at the far end of the table as my dad's golf buddy, cleared his throat and said, actually, about that $280,000 transfer. My name is Ava Bennett, and I'm 35 years old. I work as a mid-level compliance analyst at a regional insurance firm in upstate New York. It's not glamorous. Nobody asks me about it at parties. Nobody's impressed when I explain that I spend my days reviewing financial documentation for regulatory violations and flagging suspicious authorization patterns. But it's stable. I pay my bills on time. I show up every single day. And I don't ask anyone for favors. Growing up, I was the quiet middle child in a family of 3 kids. My older brother, Derek, was the one they always praised. He played varsity football. He had the loud laugh that filled every room. He was the firstborn son, and in my family, that meant something almost sacred. My younger sister, Lily, was the baby. She got the soft treatment, the gentle voice, the second chances. And I was just there. Dependable Ava. Reliable Ava. The one who got good grades and never caused trouble, and somehow still never got noticed for it. I wasn't rich or flashy. I still rent a modest 1-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a kitchen window that overlooks a parking lot. I drive a used Honda Civic with over 100,000 miles on it. The check engine light comes on every few months, and I've learned to live with it. But everything I have, I built myself. No help. No shortcuts. No safety net. I paid off my own student loans over 11 years because I was told my college savings had to be used for family emergencies. I was 19 when they told me. I didn't question it. I trusted them. I signed up for federal loans, worked part-time through school, and ate ramen noodles 4 nights a week while my brother drove a brand new truck our parents helped him finance. What hurt wasn't the money, not really. It was how they acted like I was weak for even asking questions about it. Every time I brought it up, even gently, I was met with sighs, eye rolls, or guilt. We did what we had to do, Ava. You don't understand how hard things were. Why do you always have to make things difficult? So I stopped asking. 4 years. I wasn't perfect, but I was careful. I was detail-oriented in a way that annoyed people sometimes. I double-checked receipts. I read the fine print. Numbers mattered to me. Patterns mattered. When something didn't add up, I noticed. It was the thing that made me good at my job. I could look at a spreadsheet and feel when a number was wrong before I even ran the calculations. And what they didn't realize, what none of them sitting at that Easter table understood, was that I knew how to read financial records better than anyone in that room. Better than my dad, who ran a small contracting business. Better than my brother, who had failed at 2 businesses already. And certainly better than my mother, who handled the family accounts like they were her personal kingdom. They thought I was just quiet. They thought quiet meant I wasn't paying attention. They were wrong. If you've ever been the responsible one in your family, the one who works quietly while everyone assumes you're struggling, this story is for you. Have you ever been made to feel small just for asking a simple, reasonable question? Have you ever watched someone else take credit for the stability you built with your own 2 hands? Subscribe and tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever been underestimated because you didn't brag about your success, because you kept your head down and did the work instead of performing it, click hype. Let's get into what really happened that night. Easter dinner was at my parents' house, same as every year. The dining room smelled like glazed ham and my mother's lavender candles, the kind she only brought out when she wanted the house to feel impressive. The long oak table was set with the good china, the kind with the thin gold rim that my grandmother had left behind. There were 14 of us packed around it. My parents at the heads. Derek and his wife across from me. Lily and her boyfriend beside them. Aunts, uncles, cousins filling in the gaps. And Mr. Harlan, our family's longtime bank manager, seated near my father like an honorary member of the family. Dad had invited him, as he sometimes did. They golfed together on Saturdays. They shared whiskey on the porch after holiday meals. Mr. Harlan had managed my parents' accounts for over 20 years. The conversation was light at first. Lily talked about her vacation plans. Derek boasted about a new client for his consulting side project, which, as far as I could tell, hadn't turned a profit yet. My aunt showed pictures of her garden on her phone. Normal stuff. Easy stuff. Then my cousin Rachel mentioned that she had just opened a college savings fund for her daughter, Emma, who was only 4. "We set it up as a trust," Rachel said, smiling. "So it's protected. No one can touch it until she's 18. Something about the word trust made my chest tighten. I took a sip of water and set the glass down carefully. "That's smart," I said. "Do you remember how mine was structured?" "I've been trying to get copies of the original paperwork, but the bank said I'd need to go through the estate records." It was a simple question. Calm. Measured. I wasn't accusing anyone of anything. But the temperature in the room shifted instantly. My mother sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh that was designed to make everyone look at her. My father set his fork down and rubbed his forehead like I had just asked him to solve a math problem he didn't want to think about. "Ava, we already told you," Dad said. "That money saved the family. We went through a rough patch. You know that." "I know that's what you told me," I said. "I'm just asking about the structure. The paperwork." Derek leaned forward. "You act like they stole from you." He laughed, and a few people at the table chuckled nervously along with him. Not because it was funny, but because Derek had a way of making people feel like they had to agree with him. "I didn't say that," I replied. "You didn't have to," Mom said. She put her napkin down. "Honestly, Ava, stop begging. It's embarrassing. You're a grown woman. If you can't manage your finances, that's not our fault." I felt my face get hot. The sound of silverware scraping against plates was suddenly deafening. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each second stretching out like it was mocking me. I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom wasn't finished. She gestured loosely toward Mr. Harlan with her wine glass. "Harold, tell her. Tell her we handled it properly." Mr. Harlan, who had been quietly eating his mashed potatoes, looked up. He set his napkin on the table and adjusted his glasses. I could see his discomfort immediately. His shoulders were tense. He glanced at my father, then at me. "Well," he said slowly, "there was a transfer. A significant one. $280,000. It was moved from an account that was originally opened under Ava's name when she turned 18. The room went completely silent. Not the polite kind of silence. The kind where you can hear someone swallow from 3 seats away. "That was a family decision," my mother said quickly, her voice pitching slightly higher. But Mr. Harlan continued, almost as if he hadn't heard her. "The transfer was made to another account. I remember it because of the amount. It was flagged internally at the time, but your father authorized it." I looked at my dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I never authorized a transfer," I said quietly. "You signed the papers," Mom said. "You were 19. You just don't remember." But I did remember being 19. I remembered working at a campus bookstore for $8 an hour. I remembered crying in my dorm room when my loan statements came in. I remembered calling home and being told there was no money left for me. I never signed anything. And sitting at that table, surrounded by the people who were supposed to protect me, I realized for the first time that this wasn't a misunderstanding. Something had been taken from me. Deliberately. Over the next 2 weeks, everything accelerated in the worst possible way. My parents went into full damage control mode, and I became the target. It started with gaslighting. The day after Easter, my mother called me. Her voice was sweet at first, the way it always got when she wanted something. "Ava, honey, I think you're confused about what Harold said. You know your father, and I would never do anything to hurt you. You signed those papers. You were young, and maybe you forgot, but that's okay. People forget things." "I didn't forget, Mom." "You did. You were stressed with school. You probably just blocked it out." When sweetness didn't work, she switched tactics. She called again that evening, this time crying. "Do you know what you're doing to this family? Your father couldn't sleep last night. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. I told her I just wanted to see the paperwork. That's all. Just show me what I supposedly signed. She hung up. My brother called the next morning. He didn't bother with pleasantries. You need to stop this, Derek said. You're being dramatic. You're making Mom cry. I asked a question, Derek. That's it. Yeah, and your question ruined Easter. Congratulations. Did you know the money came from my account? He paused. Just for a second. Then he said, it doesn't matter where it came from. They're our parents. They did what they had to do. It was $280,000, Derek. And they raised us, fed us, kept a roof over our heads. You want to put a price tag on that? I went quiet. Not because I agreed, but because I realized there was no point arguing with someone who had already decided I was the villain. Then the exclusion started. 3 days after Easter, I noticed I'd been removed from the family group chat, the one where we shared birthday reminders and holiday plans and stupid memes. 14 years of messages, gone from my phone without a word. I texted Lily, did you remove me from the group chat? She replied an hour later. I think Mom did. Maybe give her some space. Space from what? I asked a question. Lily didn't respond. That same week, Easter photos appeared on my mother's social media. Every single one. The table. The food. The family gathered in the living room. I was in none of them. Not tagged. Not mentioned. As if I hadn't been there at all. As if I had been erased. My aunt called me quietly one evening, her voice low like she was afraid someone might hear. Lily told us you're going through something. Are you okay, sweetheart? Going through something? She said you've been stressed. That you've been making accusations. I closed my eyes. They were rewriting the story. Reshaping me into someone unwell, someone unreliable, someone whose words couldn't be trusted. Then came the private pressure. My father showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Wednesday evening. He stood in my doorway in his old corduroy jacket, smelling like pipe tobacco and motor oil. He looked tired, older than I remembered. Can I come in? He asked. I let him in. He sat on my couch and looked around my small apartment like he was cataloging every detail, every sign of my modest life. Ava, he said, don't ruin this family over money. I'm not ruining anything, Dad. I just want the truth. He rubbed his hands together. The truth is your mother and I had debts. Real debts. The business was going under. Derek's first company needed capital, or he was going to lose everything. We had no choice. You had a choice. You could have asked me. You were a kid. I was 18. It was my money. Grandma left it for me. He stood up. Your grandmother left it for this family. No, Dad. She left it for me. It had my name on it. He walked to the door. Before he left, he turned and said, if you push this, you'll lose more than money. Think about that. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I stood there in my living room, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, feeling more alone than I had in years, but also more certain. That night, I opened my laptop and started doing what I do best. I began investigating through professional channels, quietly and methodically, the same way I would at work when a file didn't add up. What my family didn't know, what they had never bothered to understand, was that compliance work trains you to track every authorization trail, every signature, every timestamp, every discrepancy. It's not glamorous work. It's tedious and slow and requires patience that most people don't have. But I had it. I had spent over a decade developing it. I submitted formal requests through the bank's records department for archived documentation related to the trust account. I cited my legal right as the named account holder. The process took time. Banks don't move fast when you're asking them to dig up 17-year-old paperwork. But I waited. 3 weeks later, the documents arrived in a thick manila envelope. I spread them across my kitchen table under the fluorescent light that buzzed faintly above me. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of pages turning and the occasional car passing on the wet street below my window. The first thing I noticed was the signature on the transfer authorization form. It looked like my name, but the stroke pattern was wrong. I've signed my name tens of thousands of times. I know how my A curves, how my B drops. This signature was close, but the proportions were off. The pen pressure was heavier than I ever write. The second thing I noticed was the timestamp. The transfer was authorized on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 17 years ago. I pulled up my old university records, which I had kept in a storage bin in my closet. According to my class schedule that semester, I had a 3-hour lab on Tuesday afternoons. I was 200 miles away from that bank. The third thing I found was buried in the bank's internal logs. Security footage access records showed that 2 people were present at the branch during the signing appointment. The names logged at the front desk were my father, Gerald Bennett, and my mother, Diane Bennett. My name was nowhere in the visitor log. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light flickered once, then steadied. I could feel my heartbeat in my temples. This wasn't a family emergency handled clumsily. This wasn't a desperate decision made in the heat of a financial crisis. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had walked into that bank pretending to act on my behalf and transferred $280,000 out of an account my grandmother had set up specifically to protect my future. I made copies of everything. Screenshots. Scans. I organized it all in a folder on my laptop and backed it up to a secure cloud drive. Transaction trails. Signature comparisons. Class schedules. Visitor logs. Every piece of evidence. Cataloged and timestamped. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Because I knew that confrontation without preparation is just an argument. And arguments my family could win. They had practice. They had numbers. They had Derek's loud voice and my mother's tears and my father's quiet authority. But evidence doesn't argue. It just sits there and tells the truth. So I waited. There was one person I trusted enough to call. Not a friend. Not a coworker. Someone older. Someone who had known my family long before the cracks became canyons. Mr. Calloway was the attorney who had handled my grandparents' estate when I was a child. He was in his 70s now, semi-retired, working from a small office above a hardware store downtown. The office smelled like old leather and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. His desk was covered in stacked files and a framed photo of his late wife. I called him on a Thursday morning. He picked up on the second ring. "Ava Bennett," he said, and I could hear the warmth in his voice. "I haven't heard from you in years. How are your folks?" "That's actually why I'm calling, Mr. Calloway." I explained everything. The Easter dinner. The $280,000 transfer. The signature I didn't recognize. The bank logs that placed my parents at the branch without me. He listened without interrupting, which is something I've always respected about him. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Your grandmother was very specific about that trust," he said slowly. I drew up the documents myself. The account was structured so that the funds would transfer solely to you upon your 18th birthday. No cosigners. No joint access. Your parents were named as custodians only until you reached legal age. After that, only you could authorize withdrawals or transfers. So if someone else signed for me, then whoever signed committed forgery. And whoever facilitated the transfer without proper verification has potential liability as well. I brought him the documents the following week. He spread them across his desk and put on his reading glasses, the thick kind with the wire frames. He studied the signature comparison for a long time, holding the original trust document next to the transfer authorization. "This isn't your signature," he said. "Not as a question. As a fact." "I know. Ava, if what I'm seeing is accurate, this crosses legal lines. This isn't a family disagreement about money. This is financial fraud. Potentially forgery. Potentially theft." He looked at me over his glasses. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to acknowledge what they did. And I want my money back. And if they won't, then I want them to know there are consequences." He nodded. "I'll support you. But you need to choose your moment carefully." Meanwhile, my family had grown confident. Weeks had passed since Easter, and I hadn't called, hadn't pushed, hadn't made a scene. They interpreted my silence as surrender. Derek was planning a large anniversary party for my parents. 40 years of marriage. He had rented a banquet hall. Sent invitations to over 100 people. Extended family, neighbors, friends from church, business associates. It was going to be a public celebration of the Bennett family's legacy, their unity, their strength. He even sent me an invitation. A peace offering, I think. Or maybe a test. Maybe he wanted to see if I'd come back into the fold, quiet and compliant, the way I always had before. I RSVP'd yes. And I asked Mr. Calloway if he'd be willing to attend as my guest. He agreed. They thought they had already won. They thought my silence was defeat. But I wasn't retreating. I was preparing. The anniversary party was held at the Lakeview Banquet Hall on the first Saturday of June. White tablecloths. Centerpieces with roses and baby's breath. A slideshow playing on a screen near the head table, cycling through decades of family photos. Some of them included me. Most didn't. There were over 100 guests. Aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years. Neighbors who remembered me as a quiet little girl. My parents' church friends. Dad's business contacts. Everyone dressed nicely. Everyone smiling. The sound of clinking glasses and polite laughter filled the room, mixing with the soft jazz playing from speakers in the corner. My parents sat at the head table like royalty. Mom wore a navy dress and pearls. Dad wore a suit I'd never seen before. They looked happy, proud, untouchable. I arrived quietly. I wore a simple black dress. Mr. Calloway walked in behind me in his tweed blazer, carrying a leather briefcase. Nobody paid him much attention. He was just an old man at a party. Derek gave the first speech. He stood at the microphone with his wife beside him, holding a glass of champagne. 40 years, he said, beaming. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and putting family first. Mom, Dad, everything I have is because of you. You gave us everything. You sacrificed so we could succeed. Applause. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My father nodded stoically. I felt the words sacrifice land in my chest like a stone. When the applause died down, I stood up. I walked to the front of the room calmly. My shoes clicked against the hardwood floor. The sound of the room faded around me like someone turning down the volume. Can I say something? I asked, approaching the microphone. Derek looked surprised but stepped aside. Mom smiled nervously. Dad watched me with careful eyes. I took the microphone. 40 years is a long time, I said. And Derek's right. This family has made sacrifices. I paused. But I want to talk about one sacrifice in particular. Did you sacrifice my college fund too? The room went still. The jazz kept playing for a few seconds before someone turned it off. I heard a glass set down somewhere behind me. I heard someone whisper. Ava, this isn't the time, Mom said from the head table. Her voice was tight but controlled. When is the time, Mom? Because every time I ask, I'm told to stop begging. You're making a scene, Derek hissed, stepping toward me. No. I'm asking a question. The same question I asked at Easter. What happened to the $280,000 that Grandma left in a trust for me? My father stood up slowly. Ava, sit down. I can't, Dad. Because I found the paperwork. The room shifted. I could feel it. The polite discomfort turning into genuine attention. When I was 18, someone walked into First National Bank and signed a transfer authorization to move $280,000 out of my trust account. The signature on that form is not mine. That's ridiculous, Mom said. You signed it yourself. I was in a chemistry lab 200 miles away that day. I have my class schedule. The bank has visitor logs. Your names are on the sign-in sheet. Mine isn't. Mr. Calloway stood up from his seat near the back. He walked forward slowly, his briefcase in hand. People turned to look at him. For those who don't know me, he said, his voice calm and clear, my name is Richard Calloway. I'm the attorney who drafted the original trust on behalf of Ava's grandmother, Ava Bennett. The trust was structured explicitly to transfer sole control to Ava upon her 18th birthday. No other party had legal authority to access or redirect those funds after that date. He opened his briefcase and placed 2 documents on the nearest table. This is the original trust document. And this is the transfer authorization form from the bank. The signatures do not match. The authorization was executed without the account holder's knowledge or consent. My mother's face went white. My father sat back down heavily, like the air had been let out of him. Derek stared at the documents. Then he looked at our parents. Wait, he said. That money. The money you gave me for the business. That was He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Mr. Harlan, who was also in attendance, stepped forward from his table. I can confirm that the transfer was flagged internally at the time. I raised concerns with your father, but I was assured the account holder had consented. She didn't, Mr. Calloway said simply. And if restitution isn't arranged, a formal investigation will be initiated. Forgery. Unauthorized access to a protected trust. These are not family disagreements. These are legal matters. The room was silent except for my mother's quiet sobbing and the distant sound of a car horn outside. 100 people sat frozen, watching the family they had come to celebrate unravel in real time. I put the microphone down. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I walked back to my seat and sat down. I was done. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt different from the silence I was used to. Not the silence of being ignored, but the silence of things settling into their true shape. My parents' reputation in the community took a hit. Not from me. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have to. 100 people had been in that room. Word travels. Relatives who had always treated my parents like pillars of the family started pulling away. Calls weren't returned. Invitations stopped coming. Derek's wife called me once. She was crying. She said she didn't know where the startup money had come from. I believed her. I told her it wasn't her fault. My parents, through Mr. Calloway, agreed to a structured repayment plan. Monthly installments over 5 years. It wasn't about the total amount anymore. It was about the principle. It was about the acknowledgement. I didn't celebrate. There was no victory lap. I just felt steady for the first time in years. Like the ground under my feet had finally stopped shifting. I started putting money aside for my own future. Maybe graduate school. Maybe a certification that could take my career further. Things I had put off because I was always told the money was gone, that I had to make do, that asking for more was greedy. I set firm boundaries. I told my family I loved them, but I would never again give blind trust to anyone who had proven they didn't deserve it. Love and trust are not the same thing. You can have one without the other. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought my quiet nature meant I would absorb whatever they did and keep moving forward without complaint. But silence didn't mean I was giving up. Silence meant I was gathering proof. And when I finally spoke, I made sure every word was backed by something they couldn't argue with. Not emotion. Not accusations. Just the truth, documented and undeniable. If your family ever handled your money like it belonged to them, you know how deep that cut goes. It's not just dollars. It's not just numbers on a statement. It's trust. It's the fundamental belief that the people closest to you would never take what's yours and pretend it never existed. Have you ever found out someone used your name, your credit, or your savings without asking? Have you ever opened a statement or a report and seen something that made your stomach drop because you realized someone you loved had crossed a line you never imagined they would? Share your story in the comments. You might help someone else recognize the warning signs sooner than I did. Subscribe if you believe financial boundaries matter, even in families. Especially in families. And if you've ever been told to just let it go, to keep the peace, to stop making things difficult, click hype to help this story reach others who need to hear it. Standing up for yourself is tough, especially when it's your own family. When the people you're supposed to trust the most are the ones who broke that trust, it takes courage to say something. It takes even more courage to follow through. If you've been there, subscribe and become part of this community. Let me know this story helped by clicking hype. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. You're not alone in this.